I've got a little series of messages that I've kind of worked on a little bit and kind of sketched out on Bible windows. And I don't know if it's going to be one of those things that I end up preaching or if it's just one of those things that goes in the drawer of half-finished sermons that never got done. But there's a number of windows in the Bible. And it seems like the Lord gave me some thoughts from them. I think the first window in the Bible is the window in Noah's Ark. I got a little thought on looking at storms through Noah's window. If the Lord let me preach it here sometime. And then Rahab, letting the spies down through the window. Looking at salvation through Rahab's window. And then Michal, David's wife, looked out the window and saw David dancing and criticized him. And I got a little thought on looking at slander through Michal's window. And Proverbs chapter 7, that woman, that temptress, looked out the window and saw that young man. And looking at seduction through Proverbs' window. And then Malachi said that he would open up the windows of heaven, pour you out a blessing. And looking at sacrifices through Malachi's window. And then there's one where Eutychus was in church and sitting in the window and he fell out of the window. And the Lord will allow me, I'd preach on looking at slumber through Eutychus' window. So maybe after the mission conference on Sunday night, we'll run that for 4 or 5 weeks. Probably won't. Probably going to end up being one of those things you just stick in the drawer and never happens. But anyway. 2 Kings chapter 3, let me read a few verses, then we'll come back and kind of walk our way through the verses. Now Jehoram, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel in Samaria the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 12 years. And he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and like his mother. For he put away the image of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he cleaved unto the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. And Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep master, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams with the wool. But it came to pass when Ahab was dead that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. And King Jehoram went out of Samaria the same time and numbered all Israel. And he went and he sent to Jehoshaphat the king of Judah, saying, The king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art, my people as thy people, and my horses as thy horses. And he, that is Jehoshaphat, said, Which way shall we go? And he, that is Jehoram, answered, The way through the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel went, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. And they fetched a compass of 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host and for the cattle that followed them. And the king of Israel, that's Jehoram, he said, Alas, that the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, Here is Elisha the son of Shaphat, which poured water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, The word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. And Elisha said unto the king of Israel, that's Jehoram, What have I to do with thee? Get thee to the prophets of thy father and to the prophets of thy mother. And the king of Israel said unto him, Nay, for the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, As the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, surely, were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat the king of Judah, I would not look toward thee, nor see thee. But now bring me a minstrel. And it came to pass when the minstrel played that the hand of the Lord came upon him. Israel's been divided into two kingdoms. There is a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. We can relate to that because our own nation has had our own civil war, and at one time we had a north and we had a south. There are 2 tribes that make up the southern kingdom. There are 10 tribes that make up the northern kingdom. The capital of the south is Jerusalem. The capital of the north is Samaria. And when you read the books of the kings, sometimes the books will trace the history of the dynasties of both kingdoms. And sometimes they trace them together and they kind of intermingle a little bit. It can get a little bit confusing because sometimes there is a king in both kingdoms by the same name. For example, there is a Jehoram in the southern kingdom. There's also a Jehoram in the northern kingdom. And you have to be able to decipher, all right, which one is that? And we read in verse 1 and 2 that Jehoram is the king of the northern kingdom. That's Israel. And Jehoshaphat is the king of the southern kingdom. That's Judah. Jehoram, by the way, was the son of Ahab and Jezebel. Ahab had been king for 22 years and he died. And then his son Ahaziah took over, and Ahaziah became the king, and Ahaziah only lasted 2 years and then he died. And now his second son comes to the throne of Jehoram, and he takes the throne. And during that entire time of Ahab and Ahaziah and now Jehoram, Jehoshaphat has been king down in the south for 18 years. And so when Jehoram begins to reign, Jehoshaphat has been king for 18 years. Whenever you read about these kings, the Bible always makes one of two comments. It is either that he did that which was good in the sight of the Lord, or he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. So whenever I look at these kings, it's very easy just to find out which comment, and I tell you, is it a good king or a bad king? Well, in verse 2, there's a very interesting statement. It says, he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and his mother. So Jehoram is a bad king, and the only positive thing that God can say about him is that he wasn't as bad as his father and his mother. Ahab and Jezebel are notorious for their wickedness. Jehoram, he's a wicked king as well. He's just not as bad. You know, I think it would be a sad thing if the only good thing that people could say about you is that you're not as bad as your dad was. It'd be a shame for somebody to come by your casket and look at your body laying there and say, you know, he was a scoundrel. But at least he wasn't as big a scoundrel as his dad. At least he had that going for him. I think that would be tragic. Jehoram came from a bad home. He's got a wicked father. He's got a wicked mother. He comes out of that and he does some good things. He gets rid of idols. But he's not a Jehoshaphat. He just wasn't as bad as his father. And then you find out that in verse number 4 that Mesha, the king of Moab, was a sheep master, and he rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs, 100,000 rams with the wool. I believe that actually started with Ahab. Ahab had dominated some of the nations around him, and he forced them to pay a tribute or to pay a tax every year. And the king of Moab had to pay 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams, and I don't know, it doesn't say, but I think maybe he had to pay that annually. And that's how Ahab was able to keep his foot or his boot on the neck of the king of Moab. And I don't think that the king of Moab liked that. I don't think that he wanted to do that. Well, that's the only way that he could keep peace. But Ahab dies, and his son Ahaziah comes to the throne. In 2 years he dies, and now Jehoram comes to the throne, and Jehoram is young. And in the space of about 3 years, Israel's gone through 3 kings, and there's a little bit of instability in the kingdom. And Moab sees that as a weakness. And so the king of Moab says that we're not paying that tribute anymore. He flexes his muscles a little bit and says, no more lambs, no more rams, no more wool for you. And Ahab, he could have made us pay that. I don't think that you can force us to do that. I'm going to force the issue. Well, in verse number 6, King Jehoram is furious. The Bible says that he goes out of Samaria, that's his capital, and he numbers all of Israel. That's a military census. He goes out and he numbers all of his men, and Gets an idea of what weapons they have. And if Moab gets away with this, then no other nation is going to take us serious. But we can't just lay down and let this happen. And he's forced our hand. And so we've got to go to war. And we've got to force this. Or we won't have any respect with all the other nations. And so I need to take an inventory of my weapons and an inventory of our men. And let's take a head count and see how many we have. And this is cause for war. And I need to see if I have enough men to defeat the king of Moab and force them to pay the tribute that they've been paying for all these years. And I think that when he counted his men, he discovered that he didn't have as many as he thought. This is not going to be an easy thing. This is going to be too close. So in verse number 7, he went and sent to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, "The king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle?" Now keep in mind, Jehoram, wicked king of the north. Jehoshaphat, good king of the south. So the wicked king goes to the good king and says, "Would you join your army with my army and help us go fight against Moab?" And I understand that. I have no problem with that. I understand Jehoram, wicked king, going to Jehoshaphat, the good king, and saying, "Hey, we need some help, so would you join with us?" It's the last part of verse 7 that I don't understand. And he, that is Jehoshaphat, said, "I will go up. I am as thou art, my people as thy people, and my horses as thy horses." I understand Jehoram asking. I don't understand Jehoshaphat agreeing to it. Why would a good king join up with a godless king for a battle that is not his own? Why would Jehoshaphat link up with Jehoram? Jehoram is an idolater. Jehoram follows the lead of Jeroboam. And why would he get involved with him? So in verse number 7, you could write in the margin, bad decision. Bad decision. Because when Jehoram the wicked king came to Jehoshaphat the good king and said, "Will you join with me?" Let me tell you what Jehoshaphat should have said. Are you ready? No. That should have been the answer. No, I'm not going to be partners with you. No, I'm not going to join my army with your army. No, I'm not going to pretend that we are friends. No, I'm not going to go to bat for you. No, I'm not going to stand beside you. No. That would have been the better answer. Because him hooking up with Jehoram is a bad idea. And I tell you it's a bad idea because it requires a believer to join up with an unbeliever. You know 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 14, don't you? "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers." On that principle alone, he should have said no. Some of you teenagers, some of you young people, some of you young adults, you ought to go home and you ought to look in the mirror and you ought to practice saying no. Because you're probably saying yes to some people that you ought to be saying no to, and it's going to cost you down the road. So look in the mirror and just practice no, no, no. It's a bad idea because it requires a believer to join with an unbeliever. And it's a bad idea because it requires him to take on a problem that is not his. Proverbs 26 and verse 17, "He that passeth by and meddleth with strife belonging to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears." The implication is that you're going to grab hold of something that you can't let go of. It's a foolish thing to jump into somebody else's business and meddle where you don't belong. Amen. You know, there are some people in life who are just drama. They're drama kings. They are drama queens. And every time you turn around, they are involved in some other piece of drama. If there is a controversy, if there is a disagreement, if there is a confrontation, I just guarantee you that their name is going to be involved somewhere in that. And if that's you, you might want to consider just taking care of yourself. That's one reason I don't like Facebook. Everybody gets on Facebook and they put all of their business out there as if anybody cares. Can I help you tonight? Nobody cares about the trouble that you're in. They care about the trouble that they're in. And then you get on and you look at everybody's business and all of this drama that they're involved in, and then you get depressed and you want to go shoot yourself. You know how much peaceful my life is by the things I don't know? Amen. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea because it's going to require him to do wrong, to violate Bible principles. I think of how much trouble that Jehoshaphat could have spared himself from if he would have just said no. But in fact, the rest of the chapter is about the troubles that comes his way because he said yes when he should have said no. He's a good king and his kingdom is doing good and the blessings of God are on him and he's living a good life, but he makes a terrible decision. And he starts down a hard road, a long road. That's a hard journey. I'll point out a couple of lessons from this little story here, and if the Lord allow me, I want to preach the rest of the chapter next time. Write this down if you think it's thought-worthy. First thought is that a hard road begins with just one bad decision. Not a lifetime of them. Not even a few years of them. Not necessarily years and years piled up of bad decisions. No, one bad decision can ruin your life. I'm sure that all of us that have lived for some length of time can point back and identify some place where no would have spared us a lot of trouble. If I could go back in life and if I could just change that one decision, that one decision, whether it was the job or the school or who I married or whatever it might be. If I'd have just said no the first time I was tempted to pull up pornography. If I'd have just said no the first time I smoked that cigarette. If I'd have just said no the first time I went to the movie theater. I got no amens on that. If I had just said no the first time that I called that girl, all the trouble I could have spared myself if I'd have made a better decision. But you know the thing about Jehoshaphat is that he should have known better. And here's the reason why. This is not the first time that he's been here. Hold your finger right here. Go back to 1 Kings chapter 22. 1 Kings chapter 22, and look if you would in verse number 2. Came to pass in the third year that Jehoshaphat, sound familiar? Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. By the way, the king of Israel right here is Ahab. And the king of Israel, Ahab, said unto his servants, Know ye that Ramoth in Gilead is ours, and we be still, and take it not out of the hand of the king of Syria. And he, Ahab, said unto Jehoshaphat, Wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead? Does that sound familiar to you? Does it sound like history playing itself all over? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, my people as thy people, my horses as thy horses. 1 Kings chapter 22 is only about 3 or 4 years before 2 Kings chapter 3. And King Ahab, wicked king, comes to Jehoshaphat, good king, and he makes the exact same request that his son is going to make down the road, and Jehoshaphat gives him the exact same response, word for word. He's got it memorized. I think he's got it written on a 3x5 card. He keeps it in his pocket in case somebody comes to him with a decision. He can pull it out and say, yeah, here's my decision. And so 3 or 4 years earlier, Jehoshaphat is making league with an unbeliever. He's getting, by the way, into a battle that's not his fight, and he has to violate Bible principles to do that. In fact, if you go back and read the chapter, there's even a preacher in that chapter telling him, this is a bad idea. This is not going to end well. And when they go to battle, King Ahab decides to disguise himself. And Jehoshaphat doesn't disguise himself. He goes out as the king, and he almost gets killed in the chapter. He barely escapes with his life. And just a couple of years later, Ahab's son comes to him with the same scheme, same plan, same request, and a light bulb should have went off. Bells should have been ringing in his head. Something should have said no. And Jehoshaphat said, you know what? It worked out so well last time. I think I'll just do it again. Do you not think that he saw enough trouble earlier to say, I'll never do that again? Never. You know why I don't drink alcohol? Many reasons. I'll give you one. It's because I've seen enough trouble that it's caused. It's because I've seen enough homes that it has broken and enough lives that it has shattered for me to say, I don't think I'll do that. Do you know a good reason to never smoke that first cigarette is because I've seen too many people with bad health and lung cancer to say, I don't think that I will do that. You know a good reason for a Christian girl to never date an unbeliever or a Christian boy to never date an unbelieving girl is because I've seen enough good girls mess up with bad boys and throw their life away and end up with a miserable marriage to say, I don't think I'm going to do that. You know a good reason why to never buy a lottery ticket? Because I've seen enough people go bankrupt and men throw away their life savings and earnings for me to say, I'm not doing that. A hard road begins with just one bad decision. So the second principle that I want to point out of this story, and it is this, is not only does the hard road begin with one bad decision, but the hard road continues with just one bad companion. Would you come back to 2 Kings 3? Look, if you would, at verse 8. Jehoshaphat has agreed to go with him. So in verse number 8, he, that is Jehoram, bad king, says, which way shall we go? Jehoshaphat says, which way should we go? And Jehoram answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. Now there's a little word that I want you to notice in verse number 8. It shows up for the very first time in this chapter. It is the word we. Up until this time, it is us, it is you, it is I. But now, it is we. Which way shall we go up? It's no longer good king versus bad king. It is now we. Up until this time, Jehoram and Jehoshaphat have lived separate lives. They've made separate decisions. They've gone in different directions in their life. You go your way, I'll go my way. You live how you want to live, I'm going to live how I want to live. I don't agree with your life choices, I'm going to make life choices, and you go do. And you raise your kids how you want, and I'll raise my kids how I want. And you go to the movies, and you go mix bathing at the beach, and you dress half naked, and you listen to country music. But I'm not going to do that. It's you and me, all right? But now it's we. We're making joint decisions. We used to be going in separate directions, but now we are all going to go in the same direction. From here on out, it is as if they are joined to the hip. They're operating as one. They are close. And by the way, God forbid if you are in better fellowship with the world than you are with other Christians. God forbid. And by the way, there's some of you that the world would look at, and here's what they would say. You and me. It's you versus me. But there's some of you the world will look at and say it's we. We listen to the same music. We go to the same places. We like the same entertainment. We talk the same. It is we. And what's so sad in verse number 8, that it is Jehoshaphat that says we. Used to pray to God for direction and seek the mind of the Lord, but now he's closer to Jehoram than he is to God. There's a time in your life when you used to be on your knees asking God what to do, but now you ask your best friend, now you ask your psychiatrist, now you ask your counselor, now you ask that lost coworker down at the job that doesn't know a thimbleful of the Bible. And I wonder why are you listening to that? Why is it that one companion that's leading you down that hard road? We. But notice what he says. Here's what Jehoram says, verse 8. Which way shall we go? And he, Jehoram, answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. I should have put a map up, but I know that you're such a brilliant crowd that you don't need a map. I can explain this to you. But that makes absolutely no sense. Basically, for Jehoram in the north to come down and join with Jehoshaphat in the south, and for them to go to Moab really is just a straight shot down, or just a straight shot over. It's almost like a direct line. But instead, when he says the way through the wilderness of Edom, I'm just going to say that makes absolutely no sense. It's out of the way. What they've got to do now is they've got to come the length of Judah. They've got to go through the wilderness of Edom, under the Dead Sea, and then back up to Moab. If ever there was a detour, this is a detour. If you look at going to Moab by the way of the wilderness of Edom, it makes no sense at all. None. Then in verse 9, the king of Israel went, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. They fetched a compass of 7 days' journey. There was no water for the host and for the cattle that followed him. Did you know that Moab was protected on the north side? But Moab didn't have any protection or defense on the south side, the bottom side. And here's the reason why. They knew that if either Israel or Judah ever attacked them, they would attack them from the north. So they put their garrisons up there. But they were protected by a natural barrier, the wilderness of Edom on the south, and they could not imagine that anybody would ever go through that long wilderness to come up. And so they didn't even put forts down. They didn't even put garrisons down there because they knew that it would just be suicide. There's no water. It's too hard. It takes too long to get through the wilderness. It makes no sense. And so that they let the desert protect them on that. By the way, if you'll notice in verse number 9, there's another king pops up. The king of Israel went, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. Where did he come from? The Edomites have always been enemies of the people of God. You know where they come from? They come from Esau. Well, that didn't start out very well, did it? And they're always the enemies of the people of God. And so now here comes Israel and Judah. They're coming through Edom, the wilderness of Edom. And Edom comes out and he says, hey, where are you going? And they said, we're going to Moab. He said, I never did like the Moabs anyway. I think I'll go with you. And young people, can I tell you that when you hook up with one bad companion, it leads to another bad companion and then a pack of bad companions. They start marching through the wilderness of Edom and the king of Edom comes out. Some of you young people, you end up with one bad companion in your life. And instead of you lifting them up, they will drag you down. And I say that the hard road begins with just one bad decision. And it continues with just one bad companion. Write the third thought down tonight. The hard road manifests itself in careless accusation. Look if you would in verse number 9. So the king of Israel went, the king of Judah, the king of Edom. And they fetched a compass of 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host and for the cattle that followed them. And the king of Israel said, this is Jehoram now, alas, that the Lord hath called these three kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. They take this route to the wilderness. It's absolute madness. It makes absolute no sense. They get 2 or 3 days' journey in there, discover they haven't taken enough water, hoping they would find water, can't find water, the cattle are dying, the soldiers are parched, and this is not good. But they've made a stupid decision. It's turning out to be disastrous, and so here's what the king of Israel does. He decides to blame God for it. He says, alas, the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them in the hand of Moab. No, He didn't. God didn't have anything to do with what's going on in this chapter. Let me help you tonight. God didn't do that. You know anybody who makes bad decisions in their life? And when it turns disastrous, they decide to blame God. Can I tell you tonight that if you find yourself in a hole because of decisions you made, God didn't do that. And you'll never get out of that hole pointing fingers back at God. No, here's what you do. You look up to God from that hole and say, God, I did this. I'm sorry. And they may not fix the problem, but it is a good start. God didn't bring these 3 kings together. God didn't tell them to take this stupid route all way around the Dead Sea. God didn't run out of water. You did. It's on you. Verse 11. Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that maybe we may inquire of the Lord by him? Jehoshaphat recognizes we've made a bad decision. I've hooked up with some bad companions, and I need some help. Is there not a preacher somewhere that can tell me where I ran the train off the track? Because these choices are not serving me well. I need somebody that can inquire of the Lord. I need somebody that can pray for me. And I was thinking, like every other church, we've had people leave our church over the years, some for good reasons and some for bad reasons. Sometimes people have to take a job, move out of town, mission field, whatever it might be. But like so many other churches, over the years, we've had people leave for wrong reasons. And a lot of times when they do, they always throw mud back and try to put it back on the church or the preacher or on you. Somebody says, preacher, can they get right? Oh, yes. Absolutely. I'm glad you can get right with God, don't you? How would you know if they got right? So, well, if they got right, they'd come back. Not necessarily. Because sometimes there's just too much water that's gone under the bridge. Sometimes that ship has sailed. I'll tell you how you know if a person has gotten right with God is if they quit blaming somebody else for their mistakes. You know, there's people right now, who are completely out of church and they're bitter against God. And they'll never come back to any church until they quit blaming somebody else. Jehoshaphat says, is there not here a prophet of the Lord? We may inquire of the Lord by him. One of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, here's Elisha the son of Shaphat, which poured water in the hands of Elisha. And Jehoshaphat said, oh, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. And Elisha said unto the king of Israel, what am I to do with thee? Get thee to the prophets of thy father and to the prophets of thy mother. Jehoram's blaming. Jehoshaphat is wanting some help. By the way, you're either one or the other. You're either Jehoram or you're Jehoshaphat. You either blame and make accusations, or you say, I made a terrible choice and I need some help. So somebody points out Elisha, and Jehoshaphat says, oh, he's a good preacher. I know him. And they go to Elisha, and Elisha basically says to Jehoram, why don't you go ask your false prophets? You've never wanted God before. You've never wanted to hear from the Lord before. You haven't had God in your life. Now you need Him to bail you out of this mess. And here's what Jehoram says. The last part of verse number 13. The king of Israel, that's Jehoram. Here's what he says. He says, "Nay, for the Lord hath called these three kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab." He's still blaming God. No. God did this. And there are some people who can go 20 years in their bitterness against God, but God didn't do this. And if tonight, if you are in a bad situation because of bad choices, I'm trying to be cruel. I'm trying to help you tonight and trying to say, God didn't do that. So the hard road, it begins with just one bad decision. Now the hard road continues with just one bad companion, and the hard road manifests itself in careless accusation. Here's my last thought tonight. Is the hard road can only be changed by commitment for the long term. Look at verse 14. Elisha said, "As the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, surely were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look toward thee nor see thee." Well, that's sharp, isn't it? To the king of Israel, it says, if it wasn't for Jehoshaphat being here and my respect for him, I wouldn't even look your way. And then I want you to notice verse 15, how strange this gets. "But now bring me a minstrel." You know what a minstrel is? It's a musical instrument. Let's have some music. There's three kings that are standing before him. Their armies are out in the wilderness. The cattle are dying. They're out of water. And Elisha says, let's play some music. Bring me a minstrel. That's strange, isn't it? I mean, don't you know the urgency? Don't you understand where we are? Don't you understand that we need to do something right now? We don't have time for a concert. We don't have time to find somebody with a guitar and play a tune. No. What we need is we need rain and we need water. And all Elisha wants to do is he wants to play music. And we don't have time for that. And here's the lesson. You didn't get yourself in trouble in a minute. And you're not going to get out in a minute. You can look back to a bad decision and a bad companion and maybe a series of bad choices. And for so long, you blame somebody else to take the ease off of your consciousness, and you get sick of that and you decide, you know what, it's my fault. And you finally decide, I want help. But I got to tell you that help doesn't always come in a moment. It took you a long time to destroy so much. And you will have to commit your life to doing the right thing for the rest of your life, or you may never get off of that road. And it's not going to happen in a day. It's not going to happen in a week. And it may not even happen in a year. I've sat with couples in my office and they said, "Preacher, I want to talk to you about our marriage." And they spill out their marital problems that goes back for years. And Brother Dave, there's not a book I can give you. There's not an ABC that I can tell you. There's not 3 verses that you need to memorize together. And all of a sudden you have a beautiful, happy marriage because of my counseling session. No. All of the pain and the bitterness that you build up all of those years, it's going to take you a long time to turn this ship around. And here's what he says in verse 15. "But now bring me a minstrel." And it came to pass when the minstrel played that the hand of the Lord came upon him. I'm going to stop here. He said, "Thus saith the Lord, make this valley full of ditches." Well, it's strange, isn't it? They come to him. Get the picture. Here it is. They come to him. Jehoshaphat, I've made a bad decision. I've hooked up with a bad companion. And this is not going well in my army. And I should have never done this. And tell us what to do. And Elisha says, let's play some music. Let's have a little concert. Let's. And then he says, you need to start digging ditches. Now, how is digging ditches all over the valley going to help you? We're going to play music, and we're going to dig ditches. And it doesn't matter if you don't understand how it's going to help. That's what God said do. And all you have to do is you got to start obeying God. And you've been doing it your way for so long, at some point, you're going to have to start doing it God's way. One more verse and I'll stop. For thus saith the Lord, verse 17. You shall not see wind, and neither shall you see rain. Yet that valley shall be filled with water, that ye may drink, both ye and your cattle and your beasts. You know, sometimes the Lord will give you directions that you don't understand. Sometimes the Lord will tell you to do something and you don't know how that's going to help. And there are some people that expect God to get them out of trouble in a moment, and when He doesn't do it in a moment, then they get mad at God. People that have come into my office have made a mess of their life. Bad choices and bad companions. And they're staring down a long road of misery. And they look at you and they say, God did this to me. God didn't do that to you. But if you'll get on your knees, and if you'll ask God for His forgiveness, and say, Lord, I don't care what you tell me to do. If it's dig ditches, if you say do it, I'll do that. That is the first step to climbing out of trouble. Could be somebody here, bow your heads this time. Could be somebody here tonight, you've made one bad decision. And it's led to a bad companion. And you've been blaming somebody else. I don't mean to be unkind. It's not God's fault. This is you. You did this. It's not going to be fixed in a day. It's not going to be fixed in a week. It may not be fixed in a month. And it'll never be fixed until you say, God, it's me. And I'll start digging the ditch and I'll do whatever you say. And if you don't fill it with water, I'll die. But I'll take it one step at a time. And I'll do what you tell me to do. But I need your help. I'm on a long journey on a hard road. And I need to get off this road. Heavenly Father, I pray tonight that you take this word and apply it to our hearts. Help somebody tonight. You know who I've preached to. Help somebody tonight. Help these young people tonight to realize the consequences of one decision, the influence of one friend, the power of saying, God, it's me. It's me. And to be committed to the long road of obedience to whatever you say. Would you stand with me tonight? We'll sing a couple of verses of this. All did you